I'm going to start with Angelica, talking about game transfer phenomena.
Yeah, thank you very much. How many play games? We have some gamers in the audience. You play games as well? Should I wait for you? Or?
Okay, got the slides?
Today I will talk to you about post effects or auditory effects in games. How the video games affect gamers after stop playing. So we start thinking about what if we have in real life have sound effects. What will happen? And I would like to start with some video with a parody about this. So basically, you see how activities and objects are associated with sounds, and it's what happens when we play video games. So let me give you also a little bit short background about how music and sound have been researched in video games. There is a new trend in the video game industry where it's being started to consider sound and music from the video games as some kind of really music genre. And in the more old video games, we have this very simple melody with MIDI. But now with video games, we have more advanced sounds, sounds that are very realistic, especially in these games that are pretend to be very realistic and very similar to real life. So we see all these sounds that are more resemble to real life sounds. And there is in fact some soundtracks in games that have been even merit of some kind of awards. There is in fact the London Philharmonic that have very good soundtracks about music of games, and I really like it a lot. So this is in terms about music games, and there is about video games, about effects in sounds. We know that sounds are embedded in films and movies for induced mood states. In games there is some understanding about what is going on, but not so much research has been carried on in this area. And there have been sounds are embedded for modified mood states to produce physiological responses, to induce immersion and presence. As most different multisensorial channels we have, we can experience to feel more present in the virtual world. And this is why one of the reasons that it's expected that the effects of video games will be strengthened when we have these augmented technologies. So in terms of video games effect particularly, there is also more research that has been carried on in this area. There is some research in violent video games, which is a large area where it has been interesting to research about the video games effects. And there we see that techno music and also screens of pain have resulted in an increased arousal and anxiety. But there is not so much research, and especially there is not so much research about the post-effects of auditory cues and sound effects in games. Let me give you some kind of overview of what I'm doing with my PhD and what is game transfer phenomena. What I'm proposing is a holistic and multimodal research approach to understand video games effects, taking in consideration gamers, how video games influence gamers' perceptions, cognitions, and behaviors. And putting attention as well to video game structure characteristics, contents, and the activities that gamers may do in the game, as well as video game habits. So in a way to understand video game effects from more broad approach, and that also focus particularly in video game contents like violence or excessive video game playing like addiction. And today I will talk particularly about altered sensory perception, that are this auditory experience when gamers keep hearing things from the game after stopping playing. And I will give you some examples so you understand. Sorry, I didn't remove the text. So far in my PhD, I conducted 3 different quality studies. Gamers' experience were collected from online video game forums. And there were more than 1,600 gamers' experience that I analyzed. From this experience, 12% were auditory. And this is what we are talking today. I will talk today about this. And the aim of this study was to identify, classify, and explain the different gamers' experience in this modality. And then I come with a very, very broad different experience that have classified in different ways. We have, for example, the more simple modality is this involuntary auditory imaginary, when gamers keep hearing the music from the game, like when you hear a music and the music gets stuck in your head and you keep hearing it again. So this is a more simple one. I will give you examples of each one of these variety. So you can see it's a large variety of experience, and usually research have focused either in one way of manifestation or in other one. There's a lot of research about involuntary auditory imaginary, for example, and there's a lot of research about verbal hallucinations related with pathology. But there is not so much understanding about the full broad variety of auditory experience, and this is why research in video games is allowing to do it. And I think this can be used for different disciplines in a way that we can see all in some kind of gamers' behaviors. So, but how common are these experiences? Also, I conduct a survey for more than 2,500 gamers, and 97% have experienced some GTP. So it's pretty common. And in terms of sounds, 85% have experienced some type of auditory experience. So this is one of the more prevalent modalities in game transfer phenomena, the auditory ones. So gamers hear music, sound, voices from the games. They hear it in their head, in their ears, coming from objects or somewhere. There is a large variety of video games. They were identifying 95 different titles in this quality study, and the songs games have report sounds coming from game consoles. So it's a lot of variety. So now I'll give you some examples about this gamers' experience. So involuntary auditory imaginary, when gamers keep hearing the music from the game. For example, some gamers have heard the music when they just trying to fall asleep. And suddenly, because this music is very vivid, they can even think that it's coming from the console or the computer, and they have actually standing up from the bed and go to check the computer or the console to see if they leave it on by mistake. So we see how here gamers are misattributing these sounds that they are hearing in their head from something coming externalized, because they expect that the sounds come from the console. In other cases, we see how these sounds or this music is triggered activities that gamers are doing in real life. Like when you play Tetris, and then some players that have try to put together some trolley, and then they ensemble the trolley, so they suddenly start to hear the music of Tetris. So this is basically why they hear. You're probably very familiar with the Tetris sound for sure. Also, other kind of sounds occur when gamers are in certain events. For example, in the case of this gamer, that he hears the sounds the radio makes when a monster is close by in Silent Hill. And when this happens, he starts to look it around to see if the monster is close by. And he said that he had a flashlight next to his bed. So we see how, in some cases, these experiences are resulting in some kind of behavior. And this is the sound of the radio. They are very kind of binaural sounds, and these kind of sounds have been reported in different games that have similar sounds, and gamers have reported to hear the sounds after playing. So neural adaptations, auditory neural adaptations. In this case, this gamer say that after play a marathon of Portal 1 and Portal 2, he hear everything in the voice of GLaDOS. So it's very characteristic voice that I will show you now. And yeah, it seems like he hear everything. I don't know if he means that he hear everything in his head or actually hearing it. So it's no detailed information about this.
Hello, and again, welcome to the Aperture Science Computer Aided Enrichment Center. We hope your brief detention in the relaxation vault has been a pleasant one. Your specimen has been processed.
So you see very characteristic voice, and the developer found out that people feel very motivated to play the game and feel more motivated when they include the voice of the game. So, and this is a little bit extreme, but there is studies that have been induced this thing experimentally when they put participants to listen for periods of time, some female voice, and after that they expose them to some kind of androgynous voice, and they keep hearing more likely to hear like a female voice. So you see these neural adaptations that probably explain this gamer experience. So in a speech, when you hear your words, your thoughts in words or thinking in words, you have this entire monologue with yourself. But in this case, gamers are hearing voices from the game, and voices are being completed by activities that they are engaging in real life. For example, it's a gamer that every time that he passes under a sign in the road, he hears checkpoint in his head. You know, so we have some very funny experience. Other gamer, for example, that when he is having a football and he hears a football commentator say the game will go overtime, he hears in his head, overtime, overtime, overtime. So you see how they are completing and hearing what they expect to hear.
Overtime.
Oh, this is frustrating.
So this is a glitch, but this is more or less how you hear it in the game. Yeah, auditory misperception. In this case, gamers misinterpreted some sound they have hearing in real life by something from the game. This is the case of a gamer that shut down a door in the back of him, and suddenly he hears the sound the spiders from Minecraft makes. And he gets scared and he just says that he just runs. So you see, sometimes the sounds don't need to be very high pitched, but they are associated with certain emotional events in the game or very characteristic from the game. So auditory verbal hallucinations. In this case, gamers can hear voices from the video games, and these are one of the more that have been when hearing comments from gamers. They experience this like a more stressful because they are hearing these kind of these voices, and depends of course too much about the video game contents, is how gamers are interpreting this. So sometimes, for example, when gamers see objects in real life, for example, this gamer after play this game for a couple of hours, when he passed by for a paint, he hears something like a look. You know, and these are in the game you see paint, so when he see a paint in real life, he has some kind of response. In other cases, we see that gamers have reported also to constantly hear these voices, like in this white and black, the gamer hears someone whispering, and it's interesting because in a radio interview, other gamers say similar experiences with the same game, but he say that he hears So I don't know if it's something related with the D, because usually some association, some explanation why you are hearing these things, but not necessarily. So I don't know exactly in this game what is the explanation that they are hearing death. So some conclusions. I mean, gamers have heard sounds, music, bullets, lasers, breathing as well, some percussive sounds, coins falling. So as I said, there is not necessarily sounds that are very high pitched. Not all the time are music like a very sticky, like a music from Pokemon or Tetris. It's not a lot of it's a lot of variation. It's sounds that are related with rewards in the game, emotional experience in the game, and of course that are presented repetitively. So they have some meaningful for the gamer, and are meaningful, important for the game, for play the game. The circumstances, these usually occur when players are falling asleep. They keep hearing the sounds, sounds or music, and this is sometimes very intrusive, and it can occur for prolonged periods of time in a way that some gamers don't fall asleep. They provoke sleep deprivation in some cases. In other cases, it's very common. This experience occurs in general. Game transfer phenomena occur more when you are doing daily activities, when you are engaged with automatic activities. It's like a mind wandering. When you have these intrusions, sometimes images, sometimes sounds, sometimes your thoughts, and this manifests in the same way. But what is interesting with what I identify game transfer phenomena and the core of game transfer phenomena is that this experience occurs by association with objects and events in real life. And sometimes this experience occurs in this way. I mean, gamers hear what they expect to hear when they see certain objects. And these activities, the sounds are regulated by activities that gamers are doing in real life. And this is similar that we see with people that have hear verbal hallucinations in schizophrenia, for example. But here gamers interpret it as something coming from the game. After, in the beginning, some gamers get scared, but after that they realize that it's coming from the game, and they don't develop this kind of irrational thoughts and perhaps irrational behaviors. But there is exceptions, of course. So there is many gamers report that they experience this when they play in very prolonged periods of time. There is no any player in this quality study that say that they play very short periods of time when this happens. But in general, in game phenomena can happen also when you don't play so long time. So it depends on the individual and depends on the type of the game. So how they interpret this, they work in different ways, positive, neutral, or negative. It depends about the contents of the game, depends how frequent are these experiences, in which circumstance they occur, but in the survey, there is a large percentage of people that have game transfer phenomena as something positive, but 20% have experienced some type of distress at some point. So we don't know exactly in which modality we can experience in the survey, but there is something to research about to understand this. And these findings in this study suggest that there is more implications, more psychological implications to this intrusion, this auditory experience, more than when you're hearing you have earworms or the music gets stuck in your head. But why is this? Why have it more implications? Well, it is important to study the difference between listen to music and interact with sound. And in video games, we are interacting with sound. Sounds are presented in the video games together with activities, with events. It takes sometimes positive and sometimes negative properties. So then video gamers, when they hear the sounds in real life, they interpret it in the similar way. These sounds are eliciting thoughts, emotions, sensations, sometimes illogical thought, and sometimes a false expectation, where gamers actually expect to hear that something happened as in the game, because video games are developing some sequence of events. Everything that you do has some consequences. So when gamers hear the sounds or see these images, they expect that something happened in real life, at least for seconds. But this is the normal response. So I usually call these objects that have been associated with sounds and images and events in the game evocative objects, because they are elicit something in gamers, elicit emotions, thoughts, sensations, and these illogical thoughts sometimes. So I speculate that these sounds, these objects are associated with sound, are activating the auditory cortex. And this is why it's resulting in these kind of ghost sounds. So I think with developing video games, it's important to consider how the sounds are embedded in games, how they are doing it, and with which purposes, and also how we can take the best advantage to develop video games. And when we are studying association between sounds and events, we are seeing here how gamers are actually replaying these sounds, and this replay of sounds are triggering certain emotions, certain thoughts. So I think this for games in learning, change behavior, it can be very, very useful if we pay attention how sounds are developed. But also it's important to think about the consequences about the prolonged exposure to these sounds, or these ambient sounds that sometimes have the video games. Why is this happening? And there is no research in this area. At least I have not found it, much research in this area about even what are the effects when players are playing the game, and neither cause effects about video game playing related to auditory cues. Airworms are very annoying, but you can have a 20% discount in airworms. If you want to learn language, there is some language that are promoted where you can hear the sound, the certain phrases repetitively, and they say that you can learn language. I believe that it can help for some people, and I believe a certain degree can be very useful. So it's not everything need to be necessarily annoying, and sometimes airworms are not necessarily be annoying. Sometimes it's just fun, people start singing. So it depends the individual, depends how intrusive these experiences are. So one of the most important objectives in my research is to demystify this experience, to explain this experience as not pathological, that players found themselves that they are not the only one experience this, especially when these sounds are associated with aversive experience. Depends, of course, about the contents of the games, are explosions, bullets, screams, that in some cases gamers have experienced some kind of stress. So this is very important, how gamers interpret this experience. Because when pathology doesn't occur just right away, it's something that develops over the time and start by rational interpretations about this experience, this non-evolutionary experience, things that you cannot control. So some references, and I don't know if you are aware about this haptic gaming vest, which promise that you will feel the sound rather than hear it, and that it turns your body into a subwoofer. So this is a new technology that are coming. This is already in sale, and I have found a lot of involuntary movements, body sensations, and all this auditory and visual, just with the video games that we have today, and with many of them, because these are experiences collected in forums. So this is one of the limitations, so I want that you be aware about that. But there are similarities between gamers' experience. I have, before my PhD, I studied for my master thesis, and I did interview with gamers. And there are similarities along all the different studies that I have conducted today. And we see this with very old games as well. So it seems also the individual susceptibility. Not everybody will be susceptible to this experience. So and just for finish, if you want to continue, you follow my research. This is my page. You can follow my blog, Twitter, Facebook. I'm about to submit my thesis next November, but I want to continue to this with my postdoc. So it's something that it's a project that will continue. So this is like at the second stage. Thank you very much.
So, have we any questions for each other?
Maria just pointed out to me about how this seems to apply to mobile technology carried around with us as well, so that your mobile phone makes random noises or noises. Have you investigated any of the kind of device noises?
No, I can't investigate anything about that, but I'm sure, this is just focused in video games, but this definitely is applied to everything. All different technology, vibrations in the cell phone, and all these ghost sensations, type of sensations, so also apply to this. Now this week, it was also, Gender phenomenon was associated with a case of a guy that were submitted some clinic because he had a Google Glasses addiction. So he started to see her screams through the device, and also have involuntary movement. We're trying to control the device when the device were not there. And this is exactly what we are seeing here. Sometimes gamers have even moved their arms trying to use the hook. When they try to use the video games element in real life, they move their arms. So it's a lot of similarities. So this is, it will help us to understand the effects in general of technology. So yeah, but I'm not aware about any study in this area. If you know, please let me know.
I think it's quite interesting because we've had talked in previous conferences about sort of addiction to games and so on. I think this is a really quite interesting thing because there's almost like a Pavlovian response, isn't there? Where people are actually, because they've been training and doing this stuff so much, they're carrying on responding even when you remove the stimuli. So it reminds me of that very classical Pavlovian dog.
Yeah, definitely. It's conditioning behavior, and this is what happens also with adults. Sometimes you will think that just happens with children, but it happens to adults, and gamers are responding to this stimulus that they have learned to respond in a certain way. Some gamers have just experienced maybe just some thought. Some gamers have experienced some kind of urge to do something as in the game. Some gamers have heard something, some gamers have seen something, some gamers have actually do some behavior. When you can do the behavior in real life, they have actually do it. So it depends much on the individual. If you can control your impulses, you can control you can read your behavior, then you will not do it. But in some cases, some gamers that are not capable to control the impulses, they will have some behavior or manifest in different ways. So it's, yeah, we need to investigate more about which individuals are more susceptible to this experience. So there is, so far, we don't know.
Hello. You made a distinction between just listening to music and games for the sort of audio, the effect of audio. How different do you really think it is? Could it possibly be a difference in the amount of time you listen to it? Obviously, the idea of earworms in music is sort of a mainstream thing now, isn't it? And yeah, I think a lot of people who have experienced earworms in music, I've experienced them in music and in games, so I appreciate what you're saying, but I just wondered how much of a distinction there really is.
Yeah, well, it depends about the experience, because it's a large variety. So you experience airborne from listening music from the game. It's pretty similar than listening music from your favorite song. So this is similar, but what is different is the consequences about that. Because when you hear a sound and you have this reply a sound, maybe you have some memory for a nice moment, or you maybe even provoke some emotion, definitely, but you don't provoke some response, some behavioral response. And what we see here is because these sounds sometimes are associated with aversive experience in the game, gamers get scared. So you don't get this dissociation. Sometimes you hear some sound and say, like, oh, what is going on? You don't have this when you keep hearing music from the song. So the consequences, the psychological consequences, it depends on the video game contents and how gamers interpret this experience. And this is why my goal is to demystify and inform about this experience. So gamers interpret this like something derived from the game and try to interpret it in the best way. But there are similarities in certain experience. It depends. But the consequences are different in the most of the cases.
Like, as an additional comment, an interesting area might be to look at dementia, because music is very powerful.
Dementia.
And Alzheimer's disease. The idea that music can have a very powerful effect, even if you don't even understand where you heard the sound. The emotional effect of the memory of what you were doing when you heard the sound can be very powerful. It'd be really interesting to see whether games have a similar effect in Alzheimer's.
Yeah, well, there is things that happen, subconscious level, and these people have it. There are experiments where they have induced seeing video game images in laboratory, and people even with some failures in memories or no memory at all have seen the images even though they don't recall to play the game. So yeah, probably it's pretty much the same in sound. Yeah.
So I think one of the things I came across in sort of education theory, is the idea of the brain measures all these things. That if you think back to something happened a month ago at a meal you were at, you can remember how you felt and what the room was like and what you talked about and what you ate. You didn't set out to remember those things, but your brain stores it. And one of the problems in education sometimes is we don't make enough use of that multimodal impact on learning. So the interesting thing with this would be, can you use some of this to reinforce learning, which is what video gaming sometimes does when it's in its most effective thing, because it's using the different aspects of the brain. So it's interesting because you're also saying it's a mixed blessing, and it can cause problems for some people.
Yeah, but not necessarily, not necessarily. So it depends how you experience it, how frequently, and what are the contents. So it can definitely use for learning. I mean, things you can elicit sounds that are associated with modified positive behaviors, then it can definitely trigger positive feelings, you know, for example, yeah, happiness or whatever you want to do. So, and this is the thing, there is not a lot of research about conscious things. There are instruments that measure conscious behavior, conscious thought, but not unconscious thought. And this is the core against of the phenomena. All these things that you cannot control, the non-evolutionary phenomena, in the different modalities to understand video games effects. And I have been shown really very interesting results where you can research in many different areas.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. So next we have Maria, who's going to talk about urban games and storytelling.
So this time we are going to discuss about games, but we're not using computer games, we are using the city. Pervasive games, I don't know, have you ever played a game, pervasive game, a location-based game outside in the city? How many of you have done that in the past? Thank you. So, pervasive games are hybrid experiences. They can use technology or not, but usually they definitely use our spirit, our character. We have experiences usually outside. We can use the technology as well to have communication with other players or with the persons that they are involved in directing these gaming experiences. And one of these categories is urban games, because they're actually played out in cities, and the city itself sometimes acts not only as a platform for games, but at the same time as a player. What we did, I come from University of Athens, and along with Eleni Kolovou, that unfortunately she couldn't be here with us, we have been designing games and curating playful experiences as parts of Athens Plaython, a community of people that love to create playful experiences and create street game festival in Athens. We came with this idea to test the potentials of different kind of urban games based on what the situationists used to call back in France the dérive or the drifting, or this experience in which the person walks around in a city, maybe in known or in unknown territories, sometimes being directed by the city itself on where to go and how to experiment, or the psychogeography of space. All this idea of dérive, or that has a lot to do with flaneurism as well, gives a base for many playful or ludic experiences in which we actually interact with our surroundings or with other people in a completely different way in which we would have done when we're actually just on our way to go to school, to go to university, or just visit a friend. In that case, we start observing things in a much more different way, and maybe sometimes we start interactions in a different way than we've used to, especially when we're talking about a directed game. We're allowed to, because it is a game. All these different forms that I'm going to present you, this actually is a very small-scale piloting study. They all have to do with storytelling, which is a very important part of this research and of the urban game setting. Storytelling creates an opportunity to add different layers of narrative in urban settings, allowing us to play with different forms of education, such as academic knowledge, but at the same time, such as, for example, citizenship or very important social or maybe political issues. So what we did is that we used 3 different urban games that they all imply the use of smartphones and 3G technologies, and some of them GPS. And we documented and we compared the experience of the people that played the game. So first of all, the first one was a competitive street game. The second was a ludic dérive application. And the third was an augmented reality adventure game. The first one, it's called City Gories. It was designed by Eleni, and it's a very simple game. It's a game that it comes from a pen and paper game that we used to play in Greek schools all the time. In England, I suppose it's called Categories. Have you ever played this game? So it's fairly simple. Somebody says a letter, and then you have to write very, very fast words starting from this specific letter, but in different categories. Let's say a name that starts from B, an animal that starts from B. So Eleni took that idea, but she took it outside, and players, they're divided in different teams, and they have to run around the city and find people and get photographs of people, places, animals, situations that start with specific letters. That was the first competitive game. That was what happened. This is one of the teams that I followed around, and they were actually trying to find places. I suppose it was P, the letter. They were trying to find a job that started from P, or here they were trying to find a job, but they couldn't find any, so they decided to recreate it. So cheating actually was something that it's allowed in this game. The second playful experience, it's an app that you can actually find either web-based or for your iPhone or Android. It's called The Reeve, and you're being presented with different cards that give you very simple proposals. For example, find a tree, try to locate a melody and follow it around the city, and then find a red car and check how you feel about it. And then people can use it for different ways. The only thing that we did here is to translate it in Greek. This tool, it has been used as a guide, but we actually used it during our workshop to see how the people involved would perceive the playful connotation while running around the city trying to find and locate all the specific targets. And the third game, it was designed by Alexander Harissis. It is an adventure location-based game. He designed it in Aris platform, which is open, and it's called the Fool's Journey. The idea behind it is, if you actually were yesterday in Nick's experience, the pub crawl around Nottingham, it was a very well-structured guide around Athens, in which actually by using your smartphone you should solve riddles and go to the next step. For example, you can see here there were QR codes that people should try to decode and find the next riddle, and then a photo would pop up giving some more information about what's going on, and then you could see yourself in the map, but you had to follow a specific route. Otherwise you wouldn't play the game, because the nodes would pop up and they would expire if you would be there physically. Here storytelling was much more important, because this is what you wanted to see, the storytelling. So all these three games were played on the same day in Athens, and we all used the smartphones and GPS. And we documented data during and after the experience. Also, players, they had to do this afterwards, without actually asking them prior to pay attention to what they were doing and where they were. We asked them after every session to try and locate where they were and when. We allowed them to do it in a collaborative way, but actually it was interesting to see that they had completely different maps in some situations. They insisted that what they remember was much better. However, what they remembered between what actually happened was quite different in all these different experiences. And because we already had people following them around, and we already had the specific application on their mobile phones trying to document when they were and where. So, as I've told you, it's just a piloting study. So, and we just wanted to find out what are the educational implications of its type of pervasive game. But they all said that the majority of them, apart from two, players said that they found it highly communicative, they enjoyed it, and it was fun. They also said, especially for the last two experiences, that they were as an experience of getting lost in familiar territories, and they were able to rediscover and reinvent meanings and maybe new symbols. The first game was characterized as the first game that, as I told you, it was much more competitive and fun and really gay. They characterized it as an extroverted and outgoing experience, while the two others, they were much more introverted and they allowed them to think and feel. So it was much more emotionally intriguing, as they said. Regarding the spatial representation, the Citygoers game was described as the best to remember places and details because they had to look around. Of course, that was something that was expected. The Derive Up, it was the most difficult in order to redefine your track because it's all about getting lost and allowing the application and the city and your decisions to be fast. So it was very difficult to retrack, but it was very intriguing, as they said. It was the most intriguing in getting to discover new places, new situations, and new details, because you were actually eager for the unexpected. And last but not least, the augmented reality game that, as I told you, it was with a very strong narrative. It was the most helpful in order not only to identify the route. So the people that played that, they were the ones that they were able to recreate the route, which was really expected because they could see the map, so they had a pretty good idea where they were. But they also said that it was the most immersing into the narrative, and they characterized the experience as the most immersive and, as they said in some issues, important, meaningful. They all, in the end, all three teams, they discussed that both social, financial and personal narratives are able to emerge by using different games, especially when they have a strong narrative. However, they said that in the games where narrative were not so strong, and that means the first two experiences, they were able to recreate meanings that they were much more close to what the city is going on. And I'm telling you that Athens right now, it's a city with different meanings because of the financial situation. You get many ideas just by walking around it regarding change. And what they actually described is that, as I'm trying to sum up here in the conclusion, that differences have to do a lot with, first of all, the type of the immersion. If it's something that you feel that has to do with you and your inner thoughts, or even your inner voice sometimes, and symbolisms that you create, or maybe if it has to do with communications that you can have with the city itself, with your other players, with non-playing characters, or with just bystanders. With the goal of the interaction itself, it emerged that being just win the game, or just being exploratory, or just follow the story can actually be equally successful and satisfying. However, it depends always on the players, we know from the state of art and literature review. And last but not least, the spatial experience emerged by how different experience it can be according to what is being highlighted in the experience, which is either the points, the route itself, or a hybrid experience of point, route, and narrative. Thank you very much for your time. Please, if you have any questions, I will be happy to answer. Any questions from Maria?
Obviously, you know that I have an interest in kind of promoting the route learning side of this kind of activity. So you're saying that the narrative approach is the best for forming that concrete process of a route. How is it? What's a way that one can have that narrative dynamic enough that it's transferable to different routes, different lengths, different contexts? Is there a way that we can do that?
The difference is that it has to do with, first of all, the medium. So it's completely different experience, and it should be a different narrative. If it's, for example, for a smartphone or tablet or Google Glasses. At the same time, the most difficult thing to do that when you want to transfer a narrative is the space itself. It's very difficult to create a narrative for Nottingham and then being able to apply it successfully in Athens, especially if you want to take a meaning out of it. So, however, over the past few months that I have been discussing about that, there have been mentions about crowdsourcing. Let's allow the users to create their own narratives in its place. And up to now, we have been trying to play a little bit with that idea, and probably actually try to come up with an application that allows us to create different narratives for different cities for educational purposes. But regarding, as you said, root learning, I have found both in this small-scale research, but in other in research regarding people with intellectual disability, that storytelling and pointing out specific points during the route, but that highlight the storytelling and the narrative itself, can be very successful in allowing them to stay in focus and remember.
You're talking also about the positive side of the player actively building their own narrative, so to speak, taking photos or identifying things. Would that fit into that kind of context as well?
Yeah,
Would the player themselves use that in their building their own narrative?
Absolutely, and actually using text is not the best way to do it. But audio and video and pictures, it's a much more efficient and quick way to create content. Especially if you can do it in a meaningful way and create meanings and connotations between completely different people that they don't know each other. That would be amazing, but I haven't seen it up to now, apart from games such as the first one, which are very specific, very simple. And you can do that and create content and make it meaningful because of the game mechanics. If you want to have a full-blown narrative, I haven't figured out how, but I'm looking.
Can I ask you a question? I'm not an expert in the technologies here, but you were talking about just the open sourcing or crowdsourcing this and people creating their narratives. How difficult is things like ARIS to use if you're not a gamer or programmer? You know, because I was thinking, you were talking about people with different levels of learning, different age groups. You know, we have in Nottingham, we have a code club. You know, all I'm saying is how easy is this really to do for a group of people to create a narrative for an area or a space?
Some years ago, that would be extremely difficult. However, for the past at least 2 years, there have been platforms such as ARIS, in which they are really open and very easy to use and create narratives and storytelling and actually multimedia and augmented reality storytelling by actually not using any code at all. ARIS, for example, I've used ARIS in 2 or 3 different projects. Then it was directed to students, and on our last project in Code Red, it is being used in students with intellectual disabilities, in which, of course, they have facilitators, but they design the process, and then it's being transferred into ARIS in a very easy way, without any coding required. So it's getting more and more easy to do that. Actually, 1 month ago or 2, I'm sorry, I don't remember, another platform is available, this time from MIT. I believe it is called, I don't remember, I don't remember, sorry for that. But it actually has the same idea and even more possibilities, such as ARIS, in order to create an augmented reality or location-based game. So technology is getting much easier, and people are more eager to create their own narratives in the urban space.
Any questions? Let's thank Maria and Jonathan.